Doctor in the TARDIS. Next stop everywhere.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, your co-host here in the TARDIS once again, ready to talk some classic Doctor Who, some 80s Doctor Who, something I've been waiting for a while now. And with me in the TARDIS is returning special guest companion and post-operative DJ Nik. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. I guess it's a new regeneration, I suppose. No, here I am, whether you like it or not, as Mr. Baker would say.
Exactly. And, well, you know, that's the problem with regeneration. Sometimes you never know what you're going to get. So
exactly.
But, yeah, so thankfully I posted that DJ Nik was having some emergency surgery, but thankfully he's much better now and
yes,
out of the hospital and ready to talk some Colin Baker era. So I'm looking forward to this as we discuss Revelation of the Daleks. This was the last story of season 22 from 1985. So back in the 80s. So if you're in a Stranger Things 3 kind of mode with 1985, here's one from the Doctor Who end. Written by Eric Saward, who wrote the stories Earthshock and Remembrance of the Daleks from the Peter Davison era. He's also the script editor at the time. And directed by Graham Harper, who directed probably one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite story from the classic era, The Caves of Androzani. But he's also directed a lot of stories from the David Tennant era, including Army of Ghosts / Doomsday, and a little story you may have heard of, The Stolen Earth / Journey's End, you may be familiar with. So, great director. And like I said, this was the 6th serial, season 22. And, of course, starring Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor and Nicola Bryant as Peri Brown, also known as Perpigilium, of course. But Perry's a lot easier to type on my notes. So.
And easier to say.
Easier to say, yes. A lot less syllables with their Perry. So before we get into things, I know we had talked briefly when you were so wonderful to discuss The Enemy of the World back here on Next Stop Everywhere, Nick. So in general, what do you think of watching Revelation of the Daleks again?
Well, I have to say, as you were saying, last time we were here, we were actually talking Patrick Troughton, and it's, quite a time jump from Patrick Troughton to Colin Baker.
Right, a 20-year jump up, roughly, yeah.
Exactly, and so it was an interesting way to kind of look at it, because, I often rewatch Doctor Who. I mean, I did my famous Doctor Who marathon from beginning to end,
Yeah. That was epic when you talked about that the last time. I'm still in awe of that, by the way.
Well, thank you. But and so every now and then I do like to watch, random episodes just for the fun of it. Mm-hmm. But it's rarely I get to actually watch them with, shall we say, a critical eye. As in, in preparation for this podcast, obviously you have to kind of look at it in a particular way. You had kind of to tear it apart and everything else. I mean, it was great to see it. Obviously, we're looking at an era which was very maligned, I think. Unfortunately, Colin Baker was under a lot of fire for his period as a Doctor, as was Sylvester McCoy. And also a lot of people kind of felt that both Eric Saward and John Nathan Turner were kind of almost wanting to kill the show. As in, there was this conspiracy going on. They were trying to put out the worst episodes possible. So they're like, people just don't want to watch it, so it'll just go away,
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. One of the things I noticed when I did my rewatch here yesterday, it seems like this script by Eric Saward, it's very sexist, and even for the 80s, it's a bit sexist, and just the doctor is acting horribly, and I think that was a kind of the problem when Saward was the script editor on the show, is that that's kind of what he envisioned with him and John Nathan Turner for the Sixth Doctor. Unfortunately for Colin Baker, and unfortunately for the fans, and he obviously didn't serve his Doctor well in that regard as script editor, and as a result, it's probably why the ratings started going down, and there's that kind of building resentment toward Colin Baker's Doctor, when in fact it was Saward really that I think was more responsible than Colin Baker was. I thought Colin Baker was fine given his material. He was just given such horrible material, in my opinion.
This is very true. I mean, and to be honest, I often try to defend the undefendable, and I'm known to do this. I mean, there have been long debates. For example, the Green Lantern movie, I've been one of the few people who actually defended it. For certain
well, if
things.
you're a Ryan Reynolds fan, I could see that.
But however, I felt this particular episode was one of the better ones of the Baker run.
Right.
Granted, there are some huge problems, i.e. the sexist situation. And unfortunately, I think also Nicola Bryant, in many situations, is found kind of being the victim of lecherous old men. In this case, too, she was kind of almost viewed as like the sex object and not given much to do,
right.
And more being kind of the pretty girl to look at and being, like I said, kind of oogled by these rather dirty men. And so it's a shame, because she is a fine actress in her own right, and that was one of the problems. And also, I'm a huge fan of the Daleks. That to start with, and so I've pretty much enjoyed every single Dalek serial or episode. The thing that got on my nerves was the voices the Daleks had in this particular situation. It kind of grated on me.
Right.
But
Roy Skelton doing the voice of the Daleks, yes.
Exactly. I mean, then later they did find their voice, and it was actually better as things came back, especially in New Who, they gave them a better voice.
Yes.
But I have to say, when it comes to Davros, it could be the worst episode in the world, and I'm always happy when Davros is on screen.
Yeah. Here, Davros is played by Terry Molloy, which is kind of a great segue as we talk about the cast. Terry Molloy I really like his Davros. I think it's very good for what he's given again. And, he brings a lot of menace to the role, and I enjoy his performance, especially I've listened to some of the Big Finish audios with him reprising Davros, and he's superb on those, especially when it's kind of left up to your imagination to kind of picture what's happening, and you kind of obviously focus on the vocal performance. And it's just that menace comes through. He's just such a great classic Doctor Who villain, and so I'm always, it's always a treat for me to see Terry Molloy as Davros. And from what I understand, he's a lot of fans seem to like him when they meet him at conventions. So I'm very happy for him, and always open to hearing his performances.
True, and and to go back to the point that we were making earlier about the fact of maybe not being very strongly written, we have to also, I guess, put this episode into context. As in, it was the 80s,
right?
And in the UK, you were having very sort of gritty shows, things like Repo Man. You had The Road Warrior. You had 2000 AD, which were very gritty, nihilistic shows,
right?
And so I think maybe they wanted to also follow suit in that sense, because I think this is one of the darker eras of Doctor Who, with the exception of what we then see in Capaldi later on. But I think it's one of the darker, kind of grittier wings, maybe also taking into account what was coming out in the BBC, in the UK in general, plus, in full-blown punk era and such. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit harder, a little bit grittier. And here, actually dealing with a planet like Necros, where you have, the dead kind of the nearly dead being treated and such. So I think there's also that to take into account too.
Yeah, I say, and because of the setting, there's a great potential here for dark humor. Obviously,
Exactly.
A little bit of morbid humor, and obviously we get some of that with this, especially with the DJ talking about it. Because he's broadcasting to essentially. I mean, I know that they're talked about being in suspended animation, but essentially they're treated as if they're corpses in this that he's speaking to. So there's a lot of dead puns, or just the little acknowledgments of the that this is essentially like a funereal world, and with all that implies. And now, obviously, I think if this story had been made in the present, I think it would have been a much more. I would say it would have more impact. I think because the idea of this world that's dedicated to the dead, obviously with the a name of a planet, Necros, it's right there in the name. That there's I think there's a potential here for a much creepier episode than what this story projects. But again, like you said, it's the 80s. So
exactly. And even as us as comic fans, we know what the 80s were like, and it was also certain stories were coming out in the 80s, which kind of mirrored that thing of the big guns and the violent stuff and everything else.
Yeah, this is kind of like to put it in context, like you said with comics. Yeah, this is right before what is essentially a lot of fans call the Dark Age of comics, where before Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns in 1986 and Watchmen and a lot of what those series brought to the table. So this is on the very cusp of that, and as a result, I think you're just kind of starting to see that shift toward
exactly.
Maybe a few years after this, Hellblazer starts for DC Comics, which became Vertigo. That that series, and the Sandman was just right around the corner as well. So there's a little bit of a darkness just starting to creep back into the fun and light part of the 80s.
Oh yes, very much so indeed. Yeah. Before I guess the hairspray and everything.
Right. There was this desire to kind of deconstruct everything and kind of play what normally would be treated as very light and family friendly, and obviously put that darker tinge to it. And I'm guessing that maybe that's kind of what Saward was trying for here. Now, whether he succeeded or not, that's open, I think, to debate.
Yeah.
But I think he tried at least a little bit here. In addition to Terry Molloy, who obviously was in other stories like Resurrection of the Daleks and Remembrance of the Daleks from the Peter Davison and McCoy eras, we had Clive Swift, who played Jobel, Mr. Jobel, and he may be very recognizable to fans of the modern era because he played Mr. Copper in Voyage of the Damned, the David Tennant Christmas special classic. And, he was obviously much more likable there than he was here, where here he's playing like, very lecherous older gentleman wearing a bad toupee, hitting on Peri and other women and treating his assistant, Tassenbecker, horribly.
Oh, yes. And also I should add, for all the fans of BBC comedy, also he was in Keeping Up Appearances.
Right.
Those who were fans of those comedy shows like myself. And obviously was much more likable there for sure.
And if you're a fan of the Arthurian epic Excalibur, the film, he played a character named Ector in that as well. So it's a little kind of a Easter egg if you happen to be watching that film from back in the day. The very stylish and shiny chrome Excalibur.
Oh, yes.
We had Eleanor Braun, who played Kara in this, and she may be recognizable to people who saw the Tom Baker story City of Death, because she played in a rather cameo-like role an art gallery visitor, who was essentially the companion of none other than John Cleese from Monty Python's Flying Circus at the time. So,
yes.
So in a very memorable scene where they're kind of perusing artwork, and then they see the TARDIS, and they kind of kind of as an art treat the TARDIS and try to critique it like an art critic almost. Very funny scene. She also played Ileana de Santos in a Big Finish audio adventure for the Fifth Doctor era for Peter Davison called Loup Garou, which is French for werewolf. So you kind of get an idea for that story. We, of course, had the great Alexei Sayle as the DJ, something Nick could probably either cringe or identify with in this story.
We'll get to that.
I figured we would. He's notable if you're a fan of Indiana Jones because he played the Sultan in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the one who, traded in his stylish car for all kinds of, like he made this deal with, for tanks. You should have tanks, and you should have all this, and that guy.
That guy, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. If you remember that guy. He also played, I'm a big fan of the BBC series The Young Ones from back in the day, from the 80s. He played a character, several characters actually. He played the Belaski family, which essentially like once every episode he would play a different member of the Belaskis. This and some other assorted characters. One of my favorite characters that he played on The Young Ones was a character named Brian Damage, which is a brilliant name.
I love it.
Very punk name, Brian Damage. So yeah, if you ever have seen that series, it has Adrian Edmondson and Rick Mayall, Nigel Planer, Christopher Ryan, who's obviously been in a few Doctor Who stories himself, and definitely worth checking out. It's a great comedy series from the 80s. I got into it because it was on MTV back in the day, and that's how I discovered it, because they were playing it late on Sunday nights. And I was staying up late watching MTV back in the day, and I just thought it was brilliant, and I've loved it ever since.
Well, it's brilliant. I mean, plus such a lofty cast of actors there.
Yeah, exactly. Hugh Walters, who played Vogel, that's Kara's assistant in that, who gets exterminated rather dramatically and flamboyantly. He played William Shakespeare in the William Hartnell story, The Chase. So he was the first actor to play Shakespeare on Doctor Who. He also played a character named Runcible in The Deadly Assassin, a Tom Baker classic. And he played a character named Roderick Allingham in a Sylvester McCoy Big Finish audio, The Fearmonger, and one of the early ones with him and Sophie Aldred as Ace. And then we also had Colin Spall, who played a character named Lilt, a rather minor character, but he played a character named Mr. Crane in all the way later in the David Tennant era, in the two-parter Rise of the Cyberman, The Age of Steel from Series 2. So that's quite of a time jump there from Revelations of the Daleks all the way to Rise of the Cybermen. But, Clive Swift did it, when he jumped ahead to Voyage of the Damned. So not entirely isolated, I think.
Exactly.
All right. So that's any other guest cast that I missed that you found very notable?
Well, I really enjoyed William Gaunt as Orsini as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought he was,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed him.
He was very good. I think he was Orsini, and we'll talk about him later, but I thought he was a character with a lot of potential.
Yes, exactly.
I want to know more about this order of knights that he
That was
to.
a real shame, is that they kind of threw this out at us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, like a tasty piece of meat, and then they took it away immediately before we even got to sample it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it. You're never going to hear from them again.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so there's this really cool order of space knights, and we're just hearing about them for the first time, and then we never hear from them again, about them ever again. I'm like, wait, what?
Exactly. I mean, Jedi fans were suddenly like, what?
Yeah. It's like, why are you ignoring this? But again, that's why Saward was not the greatest of show.
Exactly.
Not really clicking about what would be a good idea, I guess. So had some little bit of trivia on this one. This was the last 45-minute stories or episodes of the classic era. Now, most of the episodes in the classic era were obviously around 22, 23 minutes each, but for season 22, they decided to go to roughly a 45-minute format, and which is obviously very similar to what we have today,
Exactly.
and for a traditional Doctor Who episode. So in this sense, season 22 is kind of ahead of its time a little bit, and probably it kind of shows what the classic era, how those stories could have been handled, or what they would have been felt like in the 45-minute format. And I find that kind of interesting, and kind of it's kind of sad that it was only for one season that they decided to do that, and then they went switch back to the 22-23 minutes, I guess.
But yeah, I think it was very clever, like you said, that they were so ahead of their time, because, like you were saying, these days,
Right.
that's roughly the running time of an episode of any series that we watch, be whatever it may be.
Right.
And so it's interesting that they decided to go that format and then jump back, and makes you wonder why they did that.
I know, and especially considering that even in the 80s, most dramas were 45 minutes, at least on American television.
Right.
And so it's kind of puzzling. Well, why are you moving away from that? If that's kind of the popular trend at the time, and then you're kind of digressing or regressing, I should say, back to that original format, and which obviously feels a little dated compared to today's standards, I think.
Very true, very true.
Yep.
It might have been also another reason why of the downfall
Yep.
of the series and such.
Exactly. Little more trivia I want to bring up. Eric Saward thought that he basically came up with the idea of the blue morning suits, like the Doctor's big blue cape and Peri's blue outfit for Necros, in order basically intentionally to cover up Colin Baker's horrible costume.
Well, and you know what? It's really weird. I'm one of the few people who actually like that costume.
Yeah.
And I'm Italian, and I live in the town of fashion of Milan,
Right.
which is a very weird thing to say.
Yeah, because it's a very fashion-forward city, right? So, yeah.
Exactly, but I mean, I don't know. I loved it for its flamboyancy.
Right.
Granted, apparently, Colin Baker himself hated it.
Yeah, he wanted something
all down
black,
to-
yeah.
It was all down to John Nathan Turner, who apparently always had these very colourful Hawaiian shirts.
Right.
And so he wanted something colourful, and Colin Baker was like, it's terrible. And it's true. I mean, it looks like, somebody kind of threw up their lunch on this guy's kind
Right.
of suit. But
Exactly.
But I like it because it has its charm and it's different from the other Doctors that we've seen, And so I think it's excessive, but the Doctor can carry it.
Well, the problem, I think, I agree with you that it's definitely distinctive. I think the problem is that it's so distinctive that it kind of overshadows Colin's performance, because everybody just focuses on his visual look, and that's probably why a lot of fans warmed up to Colin on audio, because all they could do was hear him and not have to see the costume. They could actually listen and focus on his performance and realize, hey, Colin Baker's a really good Doctor. And as a result, I think they've kind of reevaluated, and I think he's going to be, obviously whenever he passes, and hopefully that's way down the road, I think he's going to be looked back fondly more for his Big Finish audios than his appearances on television, I think.
Which is a great shame, because I think he has earned his place in the Doctor Who pantheon.
I agree, totally.
And even though his run was, as I said, very maligned, and a lot of fans often kind of shy away from it and such, I think one still has to take it into consideration, because, like you were saying, he is a great actor in his own right, and he had to deal with probably poor dialogue and everything, but he acted his heart out,
right,
regardless of how bad or how inane the lines were that he was given.
Yeah, I think fans aren't going to blame Colin Baker for Colin Baker's run. I think they're going to be blaming the producers, John Nathan Turner. They're going to blame Saward, and I think especially now that they've had a chance to kind of appreciate Colin Baker, I don't think they're going to be like looking at him as the reason the show, or at least his era, is so maligned. I think they're going to be focused more on the actual creative end of it, and then the acting. And I'm glad, because I personally feel Colin Baker's a great Doctor, and I love hearing him. And I wish on television, I just wish he had better material to work with.
I agree with you. The only thing I might not forgive him for was the video to Doctor in Distress. That's probably the only thing I might not forgive him for.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah. If you youngins out there who weren't around in the '80s or not familiar with this, go to YouTube and type in "Doctor in Distress" and like Doctor in Distress, Doctor Who, and see what comes up, because it should be the rather horrible. This is also like 1985, so keep in mind, they had the Band-Aid "Do They Know It's Christmas" benefit song, and "We Are the World" from USA for Africa, and it's an attempt to kind of, because Doctor Who was on hiatus for a year and a half. They tried to bring the show back sooner, and so they did this benefit record.
Oh my, it was terrible.
And it's a horrible, horrible song. And I say this as a diehard Doctor Who fan who pretty much loves most of everything Doctor Who does. If I think it's bad, it's got to be bad. And it is bad. It's horrible. So it's kind of like Dimensions in Time bad. I'm just saying. So, yeah,
exactly. So people, if you're not going to have a root canal, watch Doctor in Distress, and the effect is pretty much the same.
Right. Now, if you want to kind of do like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 and kind of make fun of it, that's probably the best way to do it, preferably with some adult beverage in hand.
Exactly.
Or 2 or 3. And just have fun with it. It's really bad. Yes. Just to put it delicately.
I'm sorry, Charles, but I think that was worthy of mention.
No. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one paying for therapy on that one after seeing it.
Yes, indeed.
So another bit of trivia before we move on to our topics. The original ending for this story. You notice at the end it kind of cuts off rather abruptly and does a little pause, kind of like an old, like 70s cop show where they would kind of just like point to something and then the show would pause and then the credits would come up. Originally they were planning to set up the Doctor and Peri going to the city of Blackpool in season 23. The original opener for that was a story called The Nightmare Fair, and that was the original opener for season 23, and it eventually was lost. Essentially, became a lost story. Was never produced, and only through Target novelization and rather recently, a Big Finish audio adaptation, were fans able to, understand that story and what was going to happen in that original season 23 version. So what Saward did, and probably due also because of the hiatus, they decided to essentially, kind of cut the moment there before he says the word Blackpool, because they weren't sure what was going to happen or if the show was ever going to come back, really. And so they just left it that the Doctor doesn't complete his sentence. And as a result, it comes off rather awkwardly, in my opinion.
It's true. To a certain degree, it almost made me think of, I believe it was Captain America Civil War, when Captain America's about to say Avengers Assemble. It goes,
yes.
Avengers, boom.
Yeah.
Credits. I'm like, what? Let the guy say Assemble.
Right. What's so hard about that? Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us were let down. But at least he finally got to say it in Avengers Endgame.
Exactly. Which was nice.
Which was good. And that was a great place to say it. So when he did. So if you saw that. All right. So let's get into our main topics, if you want. Sixth Doctor and Peri. Let's talk about them first, right and foremost. Colin Baker, he's got his cape, so he's covering up his costume, rather much to Nick's chagrin. And Peri is there in her blue outfit, kind of looking a little bit like Violet Beauregard in the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and like a little bit like a blueberry. And she's kind of whining about the snow and stuff. And so I want to get your thoughts on Colin Baker in the story, his Sixth Doctor, what you thought of his performance, and also Peri and how she's kind of treated in this story.
Okay, well, when it comes to Colin Baker, the problem I think with this serial, even though I do enjoy it, is they don't give him much to do, pretty much up until the end when he has, his encounter with Davros. Of course, we see the fun banter with him and Peri, but I feel like they really didn't give him much dialogue or much really action-wise or anything to do actively speaking within the story, because it did tend to pan a lot to Jobel, to Tassenbecker, and what was going on at Tranquil Repose, rather than let's have the Doctor get into the whole thing and do it. Of course, he does interact with these people, but in a limited fashion, and I felt it was a missed opportunity, because the story itself it's a very interesting concept, and I think they could have worked Colin's character, or the character of the Doctor, more into the story. When it comes to Nicola Bryant, well, first off, I think many young boys watching Nicola Bryant discovered they were men in that particular moment, because I think it's a very obvious and blatant fact, but she's an incredibly beautiful lady.
Right.
So I feel, a lot of men were like, oh, nice women. Okay, so but aside from that, joking aside, she's a very good actress. But once again, as I was saying, she kind of has the damsel in distress, or rather being the sexual desire of all these terrible men.
Right.
And, she could do so much more, because her relationship with the Doctor is great. They actually do play off each other very well. But once again, poor writing does not allow her character to bloom as much as it could. And it's more the fact of her being a pretty face and being kind of, like I said, should we just say the object of lust of the male cast. Right.
And, as anyone who's watched the first two stories in The Trial of the Time Lord, The Mysterious Planet and Mind Warp, you see how the Sixth Doctor and Peri get along in those two stories compared to stories in season 22, and it's complete 180. The season 23 stories, they're much more comfortable with each other. They treat each other much better. One of the problems I had rewatching this is, the antagonism, and I know this is prevalent in a number of stories in season 23. Where the Doctor and Peri are essentially, they're just kind of not like picking on each other in a friendly way. They're just kind of being a little bit abusive toward another, and a lot of exactly that kind of very passive aggressive in this story. And there's that very weird scene where they're trying to get over this wall, and the Doctor makes this comment about he lifts Peri up to go over the wall first, and then he makes a crack about her weight, and then she calls him Porky right back, and then when he climbs over as she's climbing up the wall, she happens to step on his pocket watch and breaks it, and then he kind of lays into her about that, and so, she's feeling horrible about it, and she's trying to apologize, and he's just kind of, reacting horribly to that. And there's just too much of that. You want to see these two get along, because otherwise, why in the world are they traveling together at this point?
Exactly. Why didn't he kick her out earlier if she's so irritating?
Yeah, exactly. Or, or why isn't she just insisting to be brought back to Earth and just stay there? When why is she putting up with this? And this is, obviously, if you remember the twin dilemma, their relationship started out with the Doctor trying to choke her to death.
Exactly, and I was actually shocked the first time I saw it. It's like, what in the world is happening? It's like the most undoctorish thing ever. You never ever do something like that. And like, what is going on here?
They're shocking the fans, and they're just being completely out of character. And that was a moment where they're just, the Doctor and Peri, even in Regeneration, you trying to pass this off as it's just a momentary phase. But it's hard to come back from that. Look, you tried to kill me with your bare hands. And it's a credit to Peri. It's a credit to Peri that she even stayed with him after that.
Exactly. She's like,
I mean, like you tried to
psychotic man.
You tried to strangle me. Take me home, please. Like I'm
Yeah, I
done
mean,
with
if
I'm
I'm
done with
hanging out
you.
with somebody, yeah, if I'm hanging out with somebody and they suddenly try to strangle me, like,
Right.
I don't know if I want to frequent that person
Right.
anymore.
But you know, and then he had like in the story they had Peri whining about the snow and you know just the horrible conditions, and the doctor's calling her like, well, maybe you shouldn't eat so much when she's trying to feed the fish or whatever, and just this horrible behavior. And and you made a good point about the doctor not having much to do, especially in that first episode, I think, because they spend a good chunk of the time trying to figure out how to get in to tranquil repose. You know, the TARDIS, like Peri pointed out, well, the TARDIS landed outside. They can't find a door, so they're kind of walking around trying to find a doorway, and then finally they get the bright idea, well, hey, we'll just climb over the wall. And,
Exactly.
and I'm thinking, well, why are you wasting our time with all this nonsense instead of just getting them inside and moving the story along?
Exactly, it's cut to the chase. You know, it's kind of like it makes me think of the I can't remember what Harry Potter book it was, where the three, Harry, Hermione, and Ron, are like camping constantly.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like a book 1,000 pages. And like, dude, they're still camping.
The Deathly Hallows, yes, yeah, that's and oh, I wish I could have edited those books because. By this point, you know, a lot of famous authors, especially when they're very advanced in their career and they're very successful, they write these huge, like multi-100-page volumes. And as a result, because they're so big, the editors don't have the heart to say, okay, you need to kind of chop about a third of this book out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Saward needed to do here, was kind of chop about a third of the script out and maybe rework it, so that maybe giving the Doctor more to do instead of focusing on all the characters that, hey, we don't care about as much. We care about the Doctor and Peri. We want to see them doing something, and instead of just sniping at each other for a good 20 minutes before things get moving.
Yeah, the editorial, whoever was in charge of editing kind of were asleep at the wheel, I think, on this one.
Yeah. And I kind of put Stephen King in that regard, too. I know he's a great writer. But yeah, you could kind of chop off about a good third of his book, and it'd make the pacing a little faster, I think.
Exactly. So that's the word. Exactly.
And apologies to Stephen King fans, but that's kind of how I feel reading his stuff. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's a problem, you know, with a lot of literature.
George R. R. Martin, I think, is a great one. He's done that a lot with his later Game of Thrones books, or you know, the Song of Ice and Fire books. He gets a bit wordy, a little bit, in my opinion. So,
well, or you think of even Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages where nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tolkien.
It's an amazing book. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, but I will admit there are hundreds and hundreds of pages you could just skip.
Yeah, well, he gets so bogged down in minutia. Tolkien does, but yeah. So I know we kind of digressed into a book chat here. So but thankfully
we like to find analogies. What can we say?
Exactly, it just kind of worked for us. You know, like some kind of let's see.
What's this bizarre segue that's happening right now? Can we maybe stay on point?
Yeah, can we maybe stay on point? Yep. All right, so let's try and do that. Sorry, that's a favorite quote of mine from iZombie. If you ever watched that show. All right.
Well, yes, let's cut to the chase.
Exactly. Let's cut to the chase. All right. So let's not be like Saward in the script. Let's hit the highlights. So the Doctor essentially, obviously he finds out that Davros is involved, and obviously they have history. Interestingly, Peri doesn't. She has no history at all with the Daleks. There's that moment where a Dalek, you know, she sees a Dalek go by, but she's never seen one before, and so she doesn't know what it is, and so she's just like, "Hey, Doctor, there was this some mechanical thing just came by," where you're kind of going, "Well, that was a Dalek, that's kind of important." But obviously, she doesn't know about that, so I thought that was kind of interesting a little bit, and it was a kind of good way to kind of express that. Newer companions, they're not as familiar with things, so they wouldn't recognize a threat that obviously the audience would.
No, exactly. I actually probably also appreciate that instead of her, kind of screaming her head off as female companions were wont to do.
Right.
So it was actually a nice change of pace.
Yeah, she's just more like, what is that? Something that just came by. And then Peri, well, you talked about her kind of being the object of creepy people, and
Yes.
we'll talk about one of those creepy people here in a minute. But yeah, she's like, there's the scene where the doctor has just had this gravestone that's carved to look exactly like him, although not really that great of a likeness, regardless of what Peri thinks. And it collapses on him, and she thinks the doctor has been just completely smushed by this, the statue and the monument, and all of a sudden Jobel comes out of nowhere and starts hitting on her rather creepily.
Exactly.
Just going like, here she is, she's distraught. She's like, oh my, she's trying to process that the doctor has maybe died, and Jobel's just going, hey, you're such a pretty thing. I love pretty things, and you're just like, and she's going, what is this guy doing, trying to hit on me like this now, out of all times? And I thought that was just like, really, that's all Peri can be. She can be more than that.
Exactly. That's why
Big Finish proved. Yeah. So it's just, yeah, you get moments like that. Just as a writer, it just frustrates me a little bit, I think, obviously.
Well, not to mention women viewers probably who felt kind of insulted probably by it at this point in time. It is the 80s after all, so
right.
Emancipation and such kind of happened a little prior to that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they have their little the Doctor and Davros get their confrontation, and obviously we'll talk about Davros later. But anything else about the Doctor and Peri before we move on?
No, I mean I think we pretty much covered it all. It's a very unfortunate relationship.
Right.
One would hope they'd get on better. I think the two figures you have behind you get on better than they actually the characters get on screen.
Oh, my action figures? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for those obviously you can't see in podcast land, I have my 6th Doctor and Peri action figures right alongside Davros and one of the white Imperial Daleks that I was fortunate enough to have. So, all right, topic number 2, Mr. Jobel and Miss Tassenbecker. So here we have Clive Swift's Jobel, who's just uber creepy, and the poor pining Miss Tassenbecker, who is a bit of a mouse when she's around Jobel, but rather horrible to everybody else when he's not around, and which is kind of an interesting contrast, and obviously someone that Davros kind of takes an interest in later. So I want to get your thoughts on these two characters.
Okay, well, especially when it comes to Miss Tassenbecker, I was actually creeped out when you see her kind of very mewling and such, and suddenly she starts barking orders, and I was like, "What the hell?" It's like
it's very Jekyll and Hyde.
Exactly, and she, Jenny Thomason carries us off really, really well. Just the fact of going from this pining kind of almost. Fading violet.
Yeah, shrinking violet. Yeah.
To this very sort of commanding woman. It's once again, talking about unfortunate relationships. That's definitely one of those very unfortunate relationships where she loves the heck out of this guy, even though one wonders why.
Right.
Because and she knows that he has had multiple affairs and he's a lech and everything else, but she still loves him, and it's like. Really? Girl, you can do much better.
Exactly. Yeah, she kind of needs to go up on like a daytime talk show and have people like talk about her self-esteem, because she's obviously lacking. And
Oprah would have a field day with her.
Exactly. Or Ellen or somebody. And maybe she figures that maybe because she's frustrated, she takes it out on everybody else. This kind of pent-up frustration that she can't have Jobel, but we have no idea why she would want him. Like, of all the people there, she fixates on Jobel, and he treats her horribly, like crap. So is it a question of, like, well, girls only like, the
The bad boy.
Bad boys who treat you horribly. Is that essentially what we're trying to get here? Again, I think that's a lot because of Eric Saward, who I think has some rather unfortunate issues when it comes to women and female characters. And I think they kind of come out in the script here.
No, exactly. I mean, that might have actually worked if, Jobel was a hunk, for example. If he was an incredibly handsome man, but a terrible, so demeaning and mistreater of women, it would have worked. But the fact that, shall we say, he's not exactly the most attractive man on set, it kind of seems a little bit weird that she would be, because one, he's a terrible person, and two, he's not particularly attractive. As I said, Miss Tassenbecker has to definitely kind of sort out her priorities here.
Yeah, I think so. And because of that, Davros, who's watching everything through all these cameras and hidden cameras, some overt, some not so overt, he sees what's going on. He's kind of he kind of tries to take her under his wing a little bit. Now the question is, does he kind of see her as someone he can mold and shape, or is it just something that, like, to kind of pass the time, and he's like, oh, I'm going to amuse myself by kind of messing with this girl's mind a bit and getting her to turn against the guy she loves because I hate Jobel.
Well, we know, of course, Davros is a master manipulator.
Right.
And so, of course, he will do anything to further his plans and his agenda.
Yeah. So
I'm thinking it's more the manipulative side of Davros. He's using her feelings in order to further his agenda, because he's like, here's somebody who can help me out in the stuff I want to do so that I don't have to sully my hands, i.e. murder Jobel or things of this nature. So my thought is it's mainly that. Oh, I suppose on the other hand, you could say it's almost like a kind of Mr. Burns thing going, excellent,
Excellent.
And sort of really liking the fact that he has seen her more malevolent side.
Right.
And so heck, maybe he's looking for a Miss Davros. Who knows?
It's like, yeah, let's try you out and see if you're girlfriend material for Davros.
So it could be that too.
Well, he does tell her, hey, I'm going to turn you into a Dalek. So maybe he figures, well, if you play your cards right, I'll just mutate you, and then we could be boyfriend and girlfriend, I guess.
Exactly. Things get a little lonely in the lab sometimes.
Yeah, there he is, just sitting in his chair, all alone. He's a guy. He wants to go out. He wants to kind of be a player and have something going on, I guess.
Look, even bad guys need a good time now and again.
When Doctor Who villains, they need a good dating game, I guess, for that. Or, like maybe a speed dating, I guess. I don't know. All right. Yeah, so anything else about Jobel and Tassenbecker before we move on?
I think that pretty much covers it, I reckon.
Right.
I mean, we've gone to the point where we have to find speed dating for villains and all that.
Yeah.
So I reckon we'll keep
It's kind of a disturbing thought to think of Davros hooking up with anybody, so probably should move on. All right. Let's just abort now. All right. All right. Topic number 3. I want to talk about Kara and also Orsini and Bostock. They're rather smelly, the Bostock, as we find out. Kara is essentially, she's in charge of this organization that Davros is using to... He's partnering with her so that he can get resources to reconstruct the Daleks. And because of needing more Daleks so that he could fight this kind of Dalek schism that's going on with the Supreme Dalek and his forces. Kara's not really down with that arrangement. And so she brings in Orsini and Bostock, who is this knight, this is like we talked about the Space Knights. And they are essentially brought in to assassinate and take out Davros. And at first, Orsini is not really down with it until he hears who the target is. And then once he finds out, oh, it's Davros, hey, I can go out in a really big way if I take him out. And then that kind of changes his tune. And so I want to get your thoughts on these 3 characters.
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, William Gaunt does an incredible job of playing Orsini, and he's, it's a very particular way of playing a hired gun or assassin or hitman, whatever word you want to use, because he's very kind of sophisticated, very sleek and such. I mean, he is, of course, a Shakespearean actor, and you can see that.
Yeah, it's very theatrical in his performance.
But I really, and I love the relationship between him and Bostock, because you can tell that Orsini really cares for Bostock, because when sadly Bostock, comes to a terrible end, Orsini is beside himself. He's really, really upset about it. And so it kind of is like his sidekick, and he really cares about him. He's kind of his Robin to his Batman kind of thing. He's really upset about it. And I love their relationship. When it comes to Eleanor Bronner's Kara, it's an interesting. It's one of the more interesting characters in this serial because of the fact that she's playing Davros to a certain extent, and we're always kind of wondering: does he know? Doesn't he know? When does he realize that she is playing him? Because she is very good at being deceptive.
Right.
And kind of telling him, okay, we'll send you more money and everything else. And so I really liked her performance. As I said, I think it was one of the more interesting characters in this series as a whole.
Yeah, and Davros, you have to think, was, because he is the master manipulator, he probably recognizes, he can see little tells here and there, and in her behavior, and probably was just suspecting her all along. Or as far as we know, he probably has her office monitored secretly. So
your thought is that from the get-go he knew that she was playing it?
I think so, or he was expecting it would happen at some point. Maybe he didn't know the specific timing of it, but he's probably anticipating it would happen sooner or later. Like, sooner or later, she would feel frustrated by the arrangement. She kind of acts a little bit disgruntled during their communication earlier on and in the story. And I kind of think that he was probably kind of saying, okay, well, here we go. I guess, you're going to try and send somebody to kill me. And sure enough, she does. And I think he's kind of ready for it.
Well, exactly, because I guess we see it even later, because we think of him at first as a head in a jar, when actually he's not a head in a jar.
Yeah, he made himself a decoy.
Exactly. So I guess we could say that probably he had a plan B in case.
Yes.
And also I think he actually says, people have tried to assassinate me before, you're not the first guy who's tried to kill me. So
right. Because remember he was captured by the Mavellans back in Destiny of the Daleks, and had to be liberated during Resurrection of the Daleks. In the Peter Davison era, so he probably, he's fully aware of when things like that happen, and maybe it's just his natural paranoid nature as well, that he's just expecting something, to happen at some point.
Well, I guess like any big dictator, you will get paranoid and you see enemies everywhere.
Right,
so.
and Davros, being who he is, probably realizes, well, I'm better neutralize this threat before it becomes a serious threat.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we move on?
No. I think I'm pretty much good when it comes to those characters.
Okay. All right. And so obviously, because we're talking about Davros, might as well talk about him right now. The big D himself, Davros, and also the Daleks in this story, who essentially don't do a whole lot. The Daleks, they're essentially his hired guards, or his bodyguards in this, at least until we have the Supreme Daleks show up, and there's a little bit of a Dalek Civil War battle in this episode, or in this story. So, any thoughts about old Davros, that wacky Davros?
Well, he is, of course, I think, one of the great villains of the Doctor Who saga as a whole. You've got the Master, you've got the Cybermen, and of course, I think, what should we say, as one focal character, Davros is incredible, because, after all, he is the granddaddy of the Daleks. So he's the one who created them. And I think it was such a clever character, and such a creative one at that. And the fact that I think he looks the way he does because he's so evil, that his features have almost been perverted, showing, I guess, how cankered and sort of evil he is inside. And I think, at least that's the way I perceive it. And I think that's a really great thing. And throughout Doctor Who, he's always been treated very well, I feel, both in classic Who and in New Who. It kind of shocked me in New Who to see him as a child. That kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, that was mine as well. Yeah, in the Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. That was a bit of a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, as soon as the guy says my name is Davros, I'm like, what?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, in this, he's one of the gems of this particular serial, I think, because of the fact that he is so evil, and whenever he's on screen, you just feel that's a threat. I think, even though he's a dude in a swiveling chair, you know, he just creeps the heck out of you because you have no idea what he could do, because he's an evil genius. So there's no end to what he can cook up, and no matter the circumstances, like the Doctor, he's always able to save himself. You know, you think he's done for, but he resurfaces, and I think it's kind of like, I guess, almost like the Joker. It makes me think of, because it's like it's almost like you can't have Doctor Who without Davros. I just feel there is that relationship, and there's always great banter between whoever plays the Doctor and whenever Davros is on screen. So I'm a huge Davros fan, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, he's always compelling. You know, and a lot of people, they kind of see Davros as kind of like the Hitler of Doctor Who. I see him more as the Joseph Mengele of Doctor Who. This scientist who is just capable of such cruelty and is willing to, has zero ethical standards when it comes to experimentation. And this story is a perfect example of that. We see in this rather horrible moment, this girl Natasha and her friend Grigory, they basically break into Tranquil Repose looking for the scientist who the Doctor is trying to find, Arthur Stengos, her father, and they find him. They go looking for a suspended animation capsule. It's empty. They keep looking, and they find this glass Dalek, which in itself is kind of a cool idea, a glass Dalek. It looks incredible. And this kind of red blob creature inside of it, and we see kind of a human face in the middle of that, and the creature, you know, calls Natasha by her name, and she realizes that's my father. So Davros turned her father into this creature, and he's turning people into Daleks so that he can. That's how he's restoring his number. He's turning people into Daleks, and he's, like I said, he was willing to do that to Miss Tassenbecker as well.
Yes, I totally agree with you when it comes to the analogy to the Angel of Death, Joseph Mengele, because I think it's more fitting compared to, say, if one was to say he's more like Adolf Hitler, because of the fact of his experimentation, and also just the fact that, like you said, he has total disregard for human life and life in general. For him, it's all about science, and life is just something to play with. It's not. It has no matter. It doesn't. You know, if somebody dies, oh well, bring the next test subject.
Yeah, exactly.
So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and it's, you know, he does have his Hitler moments. Davros does, but especially when he's, you know, delivering a speech, as Hitler loved to do. But Mengele, you know, the cruelty of Mengele it just exudes in this, especially in this story. And you know, we find out Davros' big plan is essentially, okay, I'm going to try to benefit Kara's company and the people of Necros by supplying them with food. But hey, you know, I kind of watched the movie Soylent Green, and
same here. I got the same vibe.
Yeah, and so that food you've been eating, it's people, just like on Soylent Green. So you like Soylent Green is people. If you've ever seen that movie, you should. But it's a good one. And so basically, he's he's doing that. He to get his resources. Like, he couldn't just supply the food. No, he has to like take the people that were in suspended animation and convert them into food.
Mm.
You know, unbeknownst to their families, who a lot of them have completely forgotten about them because it's been so long, as we find out. And so it's just, he's capable of such cruelty here. And obviously the doctor comes in perfectly willing to kind of, put a stop to his plan whenever possible. And, obviously Orsini and Bostock show up trying to make their move to take out Davros. Bostock probably gets the best of that because, hey, Bostock gets to blow Davros's hand off, his remaining hand.
Exactly, he has that honor for sure. And,
yeah, so...
And I actually wanted to pick up on what you were saying about, eating people. I was wondering, it might be presumptuous of me, but could it be that possibly the writers wanted to talk about vegetarianism and the fact that eating meat is bad? Well, I'm just wondering.
No, well, that's a good point, because remember, in just a couple stories before this one is the Two Doctors, where if you remember, they had the Endergum.
Exactly.
And, and Patrick Troughton's doctor, the second doctor, is essentially turned into an Endergum. And there's a lot of discussion about, eating human flesh in that story.
Exactly.
So maybe that's just kind of something, or just maybe it's just something that Seward finds fascinating. Maybe he's a little bit of a cannibal himself. I don't know. But,
or he's a hardcore vegetarian. He's like, look, people, right. This is what you're doing.
Exactly. Maybe he's that kind of a, and he's telling, he's basically using science fiction, as a way good science fiction writers do, as a metaphor to kind of present his ideology in a different way, and maybe make you take a second thought about eating that next burger or what have you, or steak.
Exactly.
Yep. But I find that very interesting. Davros, as we know, there's even less of him after getting his hand shot off by Bostock, and ends up just becoming a head in the next story, next time we see him in Remembrance of the Daleks in the Sylvester McCoy's era.
I actually had a quick question for you, Charles, about this.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the relationship that Davros has with the Daleks? As in, they continuously turn on him, but he still loves them, as it were, and still wants to further the Dalek race. Do you feel it is almost an exercise in futility, or do you understand what he's doing with it?
Well, I think part of that's ego. I think part of that is that Davros may realize that there may be some problem Daleks, like in the case of this Dalek schism, but he feels like he can come up with a way to correct it. Like when they do have these kind of divergences and schisms, he essentially creates his Imperial Daleks, these white Imperial Daleks. These are the ones that he's intending to send out and fight the Supreme Daleks forces and kind of regain control. And then presumably he's intending to somehow gain control back over the Supreme Daleks and his forces and bend them to his will. And maybe he figures just every so often I kind of have to do this. I don't know, but yeah, you think he'd kind of see some problems with the way that a lot of the Daleks, because of their the way they are. There's kind of an inherent flaw that he just kind of overlooks, I think. But again, I chalk that up more to ego, that his ego won't let him think that his creations don't need him.
Or deep down inside, there's a latent father figure kind of relationship. It's like, regardless of how bad your children treat you, they're still your children, so you love them regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe he does view them as his children, essentially. Either way, it's not healthy for anybody.
That is not a healthy
No, certainly not for the universe, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah, I'd say so. All right. Anything else about the story before we move on?
No, I think we've pretty much covered all ground and then some when
Okay.
it comes to the story.
All right. So what you're saying is I've talked too much. Yes, I see what
No,
you're saying.
I say we have
Oh,
talked
okay.
too
Okay.
much.
I gotcha. All right. Do you have any favorite quotes of this story?
Well, yes, there is one in particular. We were talking about the Dr. Davros kind of back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The one that kind of made me chuckle a little bit was where the doctor, meets up with Davros and says, "I see you've been busy," and he answers, "Whereas you have been stupid, Doctor." I love that.
That was a great line. I almost chose that one. I've got one where Jobel, just after the doctor climbs out from underneath that stone monument, Jobel says to the doctor, if that statue had been made of stone, I doubt it would have killed you. And the doctor goes, "Really?" And Jobel goes, "No, it would take a mountain to crush an ego like yours."
Well, yeah, that's another great one.
And this is coming from Jobel. I'm just pointing this out. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like
Let's point out
pot, meat, kettle. Just saying.
Yeah. Just saying.
Just saying. Yes. All right. Any other quotes you liked?
Oh, and then the other one was, once again, another great memorable Davros quote was where he tells the doctor, "There you are mistaken, doctor. I am known as the Great Healer, a somewhat flippant title perhaps, but not without foundation. I have conquered the diseases that brought their victims here. In every way, I have complied with the wishes of those who came." I'm like, wow, okay, can't argue with that.
No, not a bit. I like my own Davros and Doctor exchange where the Davros says, "This part of the galaxy is developing quickly. Famine was one of its major problems." And the Doctor replies, "You turn them into food?" And Davros replies to that, "A scheme which has earned me great acclaim." The Doctor replies, "But did you bother to tell anyone that they might be eating their own relatives?" Davros replies, "Certainly not. That would have created what I have is termed consumer resistance."
See, you have to love the banter between the Doctor and Davros.
Exactly. Davros always likes to play the semantic game, doesn't he?
Indeed he does.
Yep. And then, do you have any other quotes before I give my final quote?
No, I'm good.
All right.
I'm quoted out.
And there was that rather great pun that just after Davros' hand was blown off by Bostock, and Davros goes, "Prepare the surgical unit! Such a foolish waste of energy!" And the Doctor replies, "No harm in trying." Get it?
A terrible pun.
No harm, arm, get it? Yeah. Yeah.
Wah.
Yeah. Well, he probably couldn't, Davros losing his hand over it, he probably couldn't resist. I can't fault him for that.
If I'd had my drum kit out, I could have done a
I can do the, here, I got you covered right here. Where is it here?
Oh, great. You have some cymbals going on. Great.
There you go. Yeah. The Doctor will be performing all week here at the lounge, at the Astro Lounge. Please don't forget to tip your waitress. All right.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. All right. Do you have a rating for this story?
Okay. Well, when it comes to this one, as an ambulance goes by, so probably it's
that's all right.
It's
not there for you, is it? I hope not.
No, luckily not.
All right.
But no, when it comes to this one, I would give it, let's say, I would say a 7 tranquil reposes out of 10.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I kind of like this story in a little bit, I remember it kind of fondly. I know I've kind of talked horribly about it, but I kind of enjoy this one. It's from Colin's story, like Colin's era. Like you said, it's kind of one of the better stories of his era. And,
it is.
And I like the especially the exteriors. When they were on the location filming, I thought those were nice, well shot, and I like the direction that Graham Harper brings to the table. So I give this one 8 out of 10 blue morning capes.
All right. Well, I can go with that.
Yeah. So solid 8 at least. I know it's a bit generous, but I for Collins, I kind of like it's a sliding scale. I guess.
Exactly. Seeing how mean we've both been throughout the course of this episode.
I probably should be a little generous, right?
Yeah.
Let's throw him a little bone here. All right. Reverse the polarity really quickly.
Ooh, I want to see what you came up with this one, because I have an idea, but I want to see what you came up with.
Let's hear your idea. I'm kind of curious. What is your idea?
I was thinking.
Let's see if you're right. If we have a match.
I don't know. The first one that came to mind as soon as I saw this, because you see the creating of Daleks and stuff, was Daleks in Manhattan.
Ooh, I hadn't considered that one. That's a good
because
one.
the fact of the New York, the fact of obviously them being New York and creating Dalek Sec and everything else. So my mind instantly went to Daleks in Manhattan. How about you?
I think I like your suggestion better than mine. Because I went the obvious route. I went the Stolen Earth / Journey's End. Because obviously you have Davros and you have the Daleks. And there's even we get to see the Supreme Dalek in that story. So, which is obviously only referred to here in this story. But, so it's kind of, this is Davros's big return in the modern era, and it's a great story, and one I'm looking forward to talking about at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And
it'd be interesting.
So it would be interesting, wouldn't it? And I think it'd be and so I think it's I know, like I said, I know it's kind of obvious, but I think if you enjoyed seeing obviously the Davros in this story, you got to go with the Stolen Earth. I mean, it's such a great Davros story and a great return for the character.
I would say, in fact, I think both work well. So for anybody wants to watch, or has seen this one, watch. I think Daleks in Manhattan and Stolen Earth are perfect companions to this one.
Yeah. Oh, and I should point out the Stolen Earth does have a severed hand. So
yeah,
there you go.
Just saying.
There you go. I do have some listener feedback. I do like your suggestion. I think we'll go with Daleks in Manhattan. I like yours better than mine. But
let's go with both. We'll give them a double whammy.
All right. We'll do that. It sounds good. We did get some feedback from Holly from Wisconsin. So
nice.
Who writes in about Revelation of the Daleks. So she kind of set this one back earlier this month, but already kind of anticipating. She goes, "Hey, Charles and DJ Nik." So DJ Nik getting the shout out.
Hey, hello, Wisconsin.
Yep. So see, your fame has reached Wisconsin.
Wow, I have to head to the Midwest for sure.
So now you can die happy, Nick.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Have to say, I like the blue cape that the Doctor is wearing in this episode. I completely forgot about the DJ, and we didn't talk about the DJ. We should talk about the DJ for a moment.
The less said, the better.
The less said, the better. Is that your position on Alexei Sayle's DJ?
Yes. Well, let's read the feedback first, and then I'll give you a little bit more.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. All right. I completely forgot about the DJ that is commentating about what is going on Necros. Hello, Davros. You have master-like tendencies. I think you're gone or dead, and yet you managed to make it out alive. Well, the good Doctor Who villains do. Love the use of Whiter Shade of Pale from Procol Harum, right? In the background during the request dedication hour. There's a good Easter egg for everybody. And a great song, by the way. I knew I recognized Jobel from somewhere before. He played the husband of the main character on Keeping Up Appearances, which Nick was kind enough to point out. Doctor, your Yoda is showing with the 900-year-old comment. Yep, because when 900 years old you reach, look as good you will not. Remember? The whole thing with Davros and Kara was interesting, and her trying to put out a hit on him was interesting. Jobel really upped the creep factor with Peri, right? But she was safer with him than following along with the Doctor. It's an interesting observation. And the whole Soylent Green crisis is averted at the end when the Doctor tells them they can use the flowers they've been using for decorations and memorials as food. So yeah, there's kind of they like, hey, your industry that just collapsed. Well, hey, you could refine these flowers and use that, I guess, to eat.
Exactly. Go vegan, baby.
There you go. He's very pro-vegan, especially after the two Doctors. Peri asking the Doctor to take her somewhere else is tempting the fates. Little do they know what is about to happen next. Well, like I said, it was about to be something completely different. Mm-hmm. And then the hiatus happened, and things kind of went rather horribly eventually for Peri.
And we got Doctor in Distress, yes.
And we got, which is even more horrible, right? Yeah, exactly.
That was the fallout of that hiatus.
Exactly. It's like the hiatus is fine. We can get through hiatuses just fine. But yeah, tribute, like that kind of charity videos. Yeah, no, this is not good. No. All right.
Get people who can sing, we can talk about.
All right, so I'm dying to know, Nick. What's your thoughts on the DJ?
Okay, well, I mean,
let me sit back and enjoy this.
Okay, well, as you know, I am a DJ by profession and such, and so of course I was paying particular attention to this. Granted, my heroes when it comes to the DJs, and I'm going very old school, are Wolfman Jack and Casey Kasem. Those are the ones I almost base what I do. They kind of inspired me to do what I do today.
Right.
When it comes to, because they were amazing. I just found his accent when he was doing the American accent was so irritating. And I'm not a violent man, but I wanted to punch the guy in the face. I seriously want to drop the gloves and say, let's go a couple of rounds, because, dude, you're serious. When he broke into his regular British accent, he was normal, as it were, with Peri. I liked the guy.
Right.
DJ-wise, he was terrible. Every time he came on screen, because, like, there's enough dedication and stuff, I was like, groan. How long is this going to last?
Right.
Put him away. I just did not find that he was a DJ, as it were. I didn't like him. I found him terribly frustrating.
Yeah.
I mean, in other movies I've seen where DJs are portrayed, granted, it's a very, very tough comparison, but I think of Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam.
Right.
To me, that's the portrayal of a DJ, not this dude.
Yes.
But other than that, I mean, he did a good job for what he had to do. And the whole thing of this canon is based on rock and roll, I'm like, no. Why? And you, Charles, as an American,
yes.
How did you feel about the accent? Did you find it was cringeworthy, or were you okay with it?
It's extremely cringeworthy. I know there are times when Nicola Bryant, she kind of slips up her American accent.
Yeah.
But it's much better than what Alexei Sayle did, completely. And I'm completely lost about why she makes this one comment about where she's kind of watching him for the first time on that little television and going like, oh, he's great. He's just like the American DJs at home. And I'm thinking, no, he's not. He's the complete opposite of all the DJs at home.
Exactly. If you listen to American radio in the 80s,
yes.
It wasn't exactly like that.
Yeah, it was, like you talk about Casey Kasem. Casey was more like, well, put your hands on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And here the DJ is going, like, well, you guys and all this, and like, look out, doctor, this is coming, and all this, and I mean,
it's a very unfortunate American stereotype, I think.
It was, it was a, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what that was. And
maybe they think that Americans are loud and brutish and, boorish and stuff, so I have to make them as loud and boorish as possible.
Exactly.
And Americans are not like that.
It was this big cartoonish portrayal. I mean, yes, we can be like over the top and annoying, and I totally get that. I am self-aware enough to know that Americans can be very annoying at times. But this kind of just took it to a whole new level and just showed a complete lack of awareness. Like, they just asked him off the cuff to kind of oh yeah, act like an American DJ. And he really didn't know what American DJ sounded like. That's the way it feels to me anyway.
I actually believe at one point during one of our conversations on Facebook, you actually said one of the big problems, even at Big Finish, is they're never able to nail American characters.
Yeah.
Because they either don't, I mean, it would actually be, they'd be better served getting American actors. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think they'd be that much more expensive, to actually get an American actor to play an American.
There have to be American actors in Britain.
Exactly. I'm sure they're Americans living in the UK. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and maybe sometimes they do, but, I have to think that, yeah, there are more natural sounding Americans than a lot of the actors that they cast for a lot of those roles, I think. And, yeah. But,
it got better with time, though. We knew when you have Americans, they actually do kind of sound American. A little bit better at least.
Yeah, certainly better than Alexi Sales. And I enjoyed Alexi Sale and the Young Ones, but here,
No.
no. I was very glad he was exterminated.
Exactly.
So,
I'm like, sorry, Alex,
yeah,
not
yeah,
sorry, but not sorry.
I'm kind of Team Davros on this one. Kill the DJ. Why are we listening? Why are we listening to this fool?
Exactly.
Change the channel.
Exactly. I was going to fist bump Davros after that. Was like, nice one.
Yeah, but he didn't have a hand eventually, so you would have to do it
Like,
really
you can't
early.
even fist bump
You'd
the
have
guy.
to.
Exactly. It's terrible.
You'd have to hurry up your fist bump before he gets his hand blown off, I guess.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you again for Holly for writing, and we really appreciate that. Sorry about the little DJ digression, but I hope you were entertained.
We love you, Holly.
We love you, Holly.
We really
do. And look forward to you obviously writing in more. So if you want to be like Holly, please do. You can write to us at nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. That's nextstopeverywheresmg for Southgate Media Group @gmail.com. Or you can reach us on Twitter at nextstopsmg. Would definitely love it if you did that. Also on Facebook, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, of course. Please like and follow us there. Or on the Insta that all the kids are doing these days, at Next Stop Everywhere podcast. We definitely appreciate that. Nick, since you were so kind enough to join us here, please feel free to talk about whiskey and cigarettes and anything else you want to plug.
Well, I mean, for all those who are fans of country music and want to find out more about what I am up to when I'm not doing these great podcasts with Charles and Jesse and such, you can find me at whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. We basically cover the entire country spectrum, new country, old country, and everything in between. And on our website, you can find all our social media links, so Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're very, very happy if you want to check out the show and tune in. Always happy to get new listeners, and so we'll definitely see you there if ever you're feeling in the country mood.
Well, please do, and I definitely recommend everybody check out Whiskey and Cigarettes. It's a great show. So
thank you very much.
Gets the Charles seal of approval.
Well, you did a great job on the show. You actually almost outdid me. Like, I pretty much have to resign and give the
No. I was like, I did 10 minutes, if that. So
dude,
yeah.
But you were awesome. So there you go.
No. You were kind enough. Yeah, you kind enough. He had me on recently, and just to do a little quick discussion and give me a chance to promote Next Stop Everywhere. So I'm definitely appreciative.
The ladies were messaging me, going, "Who is he? Where does he come from?"
No, they were not. You lie, sir. You outright lie. All right.
I'm just saying, even though you're a married man, I'm just saying.
All right. I don't believe you a bit, but all right. All right. As for me, of course, you can reach me at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram, Facebook at Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. Would definitely appreciate that as well. And my blog at Geeky Things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere, including Doctor Who, including Torchwood, including the Sarah Jane Adventures, all kinds of comic book sci-fi news. Recently talked about Warner Media, the announcement of their new HBO Max streaming service, and news of my other podcasts they do for Southgate Media, including, of course, Titan Talk, the Titans podcast that I do with Jesse, where we talk about Titans and Doom Patrol, and hopefully we're kind of on hiatus right now, but we'll be talking about Titans Season 2 probably in October, I'm guessing. Hopefully we'll get word of that as next week's San Diego Comic-Con comes to San Diego, and they have a DC Universe panel, and hopefully we'll get some more information, hopefully a trailer for Titans Season 2 then. That would be great. And then, of course, the Fandom Zone podcast that Jesse and I are currently doing during the Titans hiatus, where right now we're reviewing Krypton, the sci-fi series, which has been pretty good and ramping up things rather nicely. Really enjoying that. If you're a big Superman fan or just kind of dig some, space opera, check that out. The Fandom Zone podcast, and where Jesse and I are doing that. And then also Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast, where Zan Sprouse, wife of comic book artist Chris Sprouse, joins me, and we talk about all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, etc., etc. And we're getting back to doing Twin Peaks, talking about it. We're going to be doing Twin Peaks The Return as we are starting our commentaries back up. So if you in the mood to kind of rewatch the 2017 Showtime revival of Twin Peaks, we're kind of starting that up with episode 1 of that run. And if you want to hear our little commentary and ride along, you can listen to that right along with watching the episode. So stay tuned for that. So please do. Next time on Next Stop Everywhere, Jesse returns. And yay! Always great to have Jesse, of course. And we're going to do another Sarah Jane Adventure story as we do The Death of the Doctor. From,
Ay, caramba.
Yeah, from the Sarah Jane Adventures Series 4, which of course features Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, meeting Sarah Jane for the first time, and also in a rather cool bit of additional casting, Katie Manning returns as Jo Grant from from John Pertwee's era, and this is the first time that we get to see Jo and Sarah Jane appearing on screen together, which is fantastic, and the two get along rather well, I'm glad to say, and it's very nice to see those two characters interacting at long last. So definitely a treat as we get ever closer to Next Stop Everywhere 150. What are we going to be?
Can you believe it, Charles? That
I can't believe it.
Doing this for that long.
5 years. We're almost at our 5th anniversary. So trying to come up with something. And that's being discussed right now. So we do have plans within plans, of course. And maybe Nick's going to be a part of that. We'll see. I'm going to tease.
I'm stroking my beard, wondering what is in the works,
Yes, as I stroke my beard stubble. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And Nick, thank you for joining me here on the podcast once again. We always love having you on here. You're always so entertaining to talk to, and I just enjoy you so much.
Oh, Shane, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Charles. Both you and Jesse are wonderful people. Thanks again for having me on. And, anytime you guys want to do it, you know where I live, as they say.
That's right. And so glad you're on the mend. Hope that continues. And everybody else, come on back. Next Stop Everywhere 149, The Death of the Doctor. It's going to be good. We'll see you next time right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Ciao.